Coming up next, Doug Nordman and Carol Pittner are a dynamic father-daughter duo. Both have served in our armed forces in the Navy. They have done just incredible jobs writing this book together about raising a financially savvy family. And you know what? Even if you're not bringing up any children, I think there's so many lessons in the way these people handle money and they make decisions. I can't wait to talk to them, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Doug and Carol, how are you two?
Well, I'm a parent, so I'm a little tired, not going to lie.
Hi, Joe. It's good to talk to you again. I really enjoy having a Doug on the show. We need more Dougs in podcasting, so thank you for having Doug around.
Yes, absolutely. The more Dougs, the better. Although I feel like everybody calls you Nord, so have you disowned your Doug? Is that the deal?
Oh, yeah, I respond to either name. Nords was the family-friendly version that my first XO gave me on my first submarine, so that one's just kind of stuck with me over the years.
I want to ask.
And as a further derivative, mine was Nordie. So we have Nords and then we have Nordie.
That's right.
Oh, nice. We got like levels of the Nord here, right? Well, let's start off, Doug, with you. You're a money nerd through and through, which I know, and your daughter knows, but our listeners don't know. You actually, I think this is like the height of nerdery, which is, you know, we could have a picture of you, Doug, on a mantle somewhere. Because,
Thank you.
well, did you really keep track of how much money it took you and Marge to raise Carol?
Well, what are you saying? Are you saying that not everybody does that? Of course we did. We wanted to know. We were running Quicken. We had just installed Quicken a couple of months before Marge delivered Carol, and so it was a lot of fun to track all the expenses. And of course, we tracked $166,000, about 2/3 of what the USDA at the time said it cost to raise the average child. So when you're able to raise a kid for easily 1/3 off, you want to talk about that and let people know it's not as scary as it looks.
Carol, do you feel like you were on the end of the discount bin being 1/3 off?
Sadly, there is no warranty,
really
no
don't.
refunds, no reimbursements.
Right, yes. I've heard that's in general for parenting, but no, there was no feeling that I was missing out on anything or that there was something that I was being told you can't afford or you can't have. Frankly, I didn't really notice anything until we got to the flashy years, the middle school, the high school years. And that was because I was paying for most of my own stuff at that point, but my friends were still getting, you know, all the designer clothes and designer bags and designer shoes because somebody else was paying for it for them. But me, I didn't want to pay that kind of designer money. I didn't have that kind of designer money.
Yeah, and I want to get back to that.
Choices with your money.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to get back to that because that is about your choice, not a parent's choice that you decided that wasn't worth your money. But I want to go back to this idea of $200,000, $250,000 to raise a kid. And while, Doug, you know, you and I are laughing about the fact that that's a third off average, I think there's still a lot of people surprised by that number. Having a child is very expensive.
I think it's expensive at the hospital if you don't have the insurance coverage, but once you bring the child home, I don't know if it's like this for every family, but many hand-me-downs have gone through our house to Carol, and many, many more hand-me-downs. I mean, the world today seems awash in used baby clothing, has gone through their house. And so right off the bat, you're never probably going to need to buy the designer stuff for the first 2 or 3 years for a kid's. I mean, go ahead and have fun if you want to buy something that's very special to the child or very special to the family. But that's more entertainment than it is health and sanitation and handing clothes down among family members or shopping at thrift stores and garage sales. We have always enjoyed that type of lifestyle. We've always been frugal, and it's always been a fun challenge. And we continued that with her. I will say, though, that the grocery bills for a teenager, that's a lot. That's actually where the real money budgeting starts happening, is when you're trying to keep up with their calorie consumption.
I thought
Meanwhile,
that
I have I have a toddler at home, right? And so my grocery budget's really easy right now. I have to buy Greek yogurt, hot dogs, and peanut butter, and that's about it.
But I want to ask though. Well, I don't know how much, Doug, you took these from year to year. I didn't even expect that we'd go here, but those early years to me with my twins, I felt like from 0 to 5 were super expensive, and I don't know if it's the fact that I'm early in my career and struggling with income and expenses because I haven't gotten raises yet, or if it's because kids are more expensive till they reach 5, 6 years old and they go off to school and spend part of the day there. Or are they more expensive as teenagers? Like, did you look at the different periods of kids' ages? Well, at least, value of one, Carol, and see
That's
what
right.
she was most expensive?
She's worked out
So I
pretty
think the
good so
biggest
far,
thing-
but sorry.
Yeah, I think the most expensive thing is, mom and dad were in the military system. So I think one of the biggest early expenses that they didn't have that a lot of parents have nowadays is childcare. I can tell you right now that I'm paying about $1,500 a month, give or take, on one child. We're only talking about one sibling. We're not talking about when you have multiple siblings or if you have multiple kids that were all sharing the same birth date. But that said, that's still my biggest expense. To Dad's point, we have a family rule that if you want the kid to wear it, you have to send it. So if you want them to wear the Jedi costume, you have to send the Jedi costume. And we'll send photos, of course. But that's made it easier, is that we knew that we were going to have the big expense like daycare, so we allocated the funds in that direction. But we're not exactly skimping on everything else to make up for it. We're just recognizing that we need it for daycare, and we don't care about clothing, so we're going to spend the money on daycare, and we'll have everybody else spend the money on clothing.
That's where the real expense comes in. And up till Carol started kindergarten, childcare was a very big expense, especially because Marge and I were both dual military active duty at the time. And so the likelihood was that we'd drop off early and pick up late. And so the childcare expense is a very big issue when you're starting a family. I would say it maybe from 0 to 5, that's probably by far the biggest expense, followed closely by diapers. And then after that, food is fairly straightforward. I mean, they do eat a lot for such a small, tiny human, but it's affordable early on. And then, of course, by the time they're the size of an adult as a teenager, that expense starts ramping up. We did deal during the early school years with all the expenses of buying what we needed for the school supplies. And that got very expensive as a teenager. I think, Carol, you remember the graphing calculator that you had to have for math classes, but that turned into a teachable moment, and it wasn't as expensive as we had originally feared. Once you buy one used and use it for the school year and then sell it to the next kid in line behind you in the school system, then you essentially rented a calculator for a year for about 20, 25 bucks. But if you go out and pay full retail, yes, it is very expensive. And I think childcare is probably the biggest expense. In my case, in my spouse's case, I don't think either one of us were ready to do the childcare by ourselves. You need to have some respite care. You need to have some kind of a HUI, a neighborhood group, to share childcare among people. And there's a lot of things that are learned at a child care center that a kid would need to learn at that age. And if nothing else, their immune system becomes very much stronger from living with all the other kids at the child care center and bringing that home for the family. But also just the basic social skills and learning how to play with others. That's something that's easily done at a child care center. It's a very big expense, but I think there's a very big payoff at the end.
I'm laughing because my wife works in health, and I got COVID. I got COVID twice, and she never got it. She's around kids all the time, and she never got it. But I think it's because of that immune system, Doug. I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not. And please, people that know science, don't. I have no idea, but I can't figure out how I was the only person she was around for a good part of COVID, and she never got it. I can't figure out how I got it, but that's a whole different thing. I want to ask you about the genesis of this project in general, because I think, Doug, this all started at a Camp Phi, which for people that,
Exactly.
We've mentioned Camp Phi a few times here, but not a ton. So Camp Phi is this camp that happens all around the United States, made by this wonderful guy named Stephen Boyer. And he sets up these weekends that initially, Doug, to me sounded absolutely horrible. You go to this. Yeah. Well, no, not that part. It's the fact that I'm a little too bougie for sleeping on a razor thin mattress. Like, there was a day We're sleeping on a razor thin mattress with Doc G as my, over Earn and Invest was my roommate. I have a roommate that's not my spouse.
Okay, now it's hardship. Yeah.
Yes, now it's absolutely horrible. And by the way, we're going to sit around and talk about money. But by the end of the weekend, as you guys know, it's wonderful. But this all started at one of those camps, I believe. Tell me that story, Doug.
I'd been going to FinCon for 3 or 4 years by this point, and when Camp FI and Camp Mustache came along, I started attending those. And as I got to probably my third or fourth Camp FI, I think it was 2016, I would start to talk about financial independence and high savings rate and 4% safe withdrawal rate and everything we know, which seems common knowledge today. Back in the 80s and 90s, this was blazing, bleeding, cutting edge. And I get the audience reaction of, yeah, we get it. We understand math. We know how to do that. Tell us how we teach our kids. And I'd say for the first 2 Camp FIs where I got that question, I pretty much babbled something that we had done. We gave Carol an allowance, but I really didn't have an answer ready for that subject. And even more disappointing from my perspective about my performance was that I did suggest to one of the Camp FI attendees that they try to give their kids an allowance and let them make some choices with small amounts of money and see how that worked out. And we met again a few months later, a different Camp FI, and they said, I gave the kids the money, but they lit it on fire and ran around the backyard like it was a 4th of July sprinkler, and they made all kinds of bad choices with it. And I really didn't feel like it was going well. I felt like we were wasting the money, so I stopped doing it. And so now I was not only not giving good advice, but I was actively delivering what people interpreted as bad advice. And so I figured I had to get this straightened out and understand what I was dealing with. And then one day we were visiting Carol and her spouse, and we had that dinner table conversation about Camp FI. We'd already finished talking about spreadsheets.
Of course.
We started talking about Camp FI, and I said, Carol, I got that question again about raising smart kids with money, and I didn't really have a very good answer. What do you remember? And she'd been apparently holding on to some of these thoughts for quite a few years, and she had a lot on her mind.
I remember a lot. Yes.
And at about 3 or 4 minutes into it, I was really enjoying what I was hearing from her, but about 3 or 4 minutes into it, my spouse looked at me and made that little motion with her hands that means you better start writing this down. And at the end of the dinner table conversation, we'd already thought about writing a book. And after that, I don't speak for everyone in the audience, but I will say that doing a project like this with one of your progeny, one of your children, adult children, is a wonderful experience and a fantastic way to get to know them as an adult and bonding, and a whole lot of other secrets came out during the editing, perhaps had never really had the right opportunity to discuss before. That was very educational for me as well.
Yeah, the fact that you two are still speaking is good. I finally read all the books
on the shelf, by the way.
Say it again. Say that again, Carol.
I finally read all the books on the shelf, by the way. During COVID, in between nap times and sleep deprivation, I finally read all the books on the shelf.
That was one of the revelations, Joe, is that all the books that I was leaving out for her to read, all the books that I put in her bedroom, all the books that I left artfully scattered around the house that would give her financial literacy in about an hour, she read none of them. And that's one of the major lessons that today I deliver to families is you got a book, great, they don't care. Go to YouTube, go to ebooks, go to audiobooks, do anything but dead trees on paper.
Well, and you make this point, Carol, in the book too, which is, parents can do everything they want, but ultimately it's going to be the child's choice whether they dive in or not.
Exactly. And as a parent, I'm seeing that from both perspectives now. I remember being the kid and my parents telling me to do something and I'm thinking, haha, no, that's not happening. It's a whole different perspective when you're staring down your toddler and you're watching her in her head, because she can't quite say it yet, is going, haha, no. And you're just like, okay, well, this is not going to work. I'm going to have to be more of a ninja parent about this. I'm going to have to figure out how to sneak this in somehow. And the reality was that it was more about repetition than it was about giving the order and expecting it to be followed. It was letting the kid, telling them, hey, I think you should do this. And then you're telling the kid not to fall down the stairs, and then they fall down the stairs. And they realize, okay, I should not do that. I should do what mom and dad said, not because they're right, but because this hurts.
Well, and it's funny that you say that, because you also make the point, Carol, in the book that that you can you can try to stop your children from making financial mistakes, but it actually is them making mistakes that's the important thing. It's about letting them fail.
It's a
I
little better
remember
to start
being
failing with small amounts of money, right, Carol?
right, and I remember being in a social situation where I was convinced to buy a placemat. And of all the things a fourth grader will buy, the last thing you expect a fourth grader to buy is a placemat. But it was a social situation. I was trying to get along with some people that I had gone out with. I was trying to be the cool kid, trying to go along with the, hey, there's 4 of us here. There's four placemats in this one set. You should buy one with us. And I came home, and I think I spent the rest of the evening complaining to my parents about how I got fooled into buying a placemat. But a placemat costs like, what, $10? Not even in today's world? And so making that mistake in 4th grade with $10 is way different than making that mistake with a Coach or a Prada purse in high school because you want to be the cool person in the classroom. And the reality is, whether it was a placemat or a purse, now that I'm, oh my gosh, it must be 15 years out of high school, I actually don't even remember what the other kids were wearing anymore.
And you guys also dispute this idea of having kids save for the future at the beginning. Like when they first start getting money, neither of you seem like big fans of, hey, let's take all this money and save it.
And absolutely not. There's no interest in doing that. What kids want to learn how to do is they want to learn how to manage the money and use the money and make choices with the money. This is where the real power is being able to choose to eat pizza or buy ice cream or get that cool toy at the store. And you have to use the money. If you tell them to put it away somewhere and save it for 15 years, and if they're really good, they can spend it at college, well, who wants to go to school? And it makes no sense. So to a kid, if a parent tries to confiscate their money for saving, to a kid, the only way to avoid having the authorities taking away all your money from you on your birthday is for you to spend it as fast as you can and just get it out there and make very fast choices because you're racing ahead of the parents who are going to take all your money away. And instead, the idea is to give them the money, experience it, talk about the potential, talk about the opportunities, talk about the choices, and then let them go out there and make those choices. And I can guarantee you they will mostly be bad choices. And that's where the real learning happens. You experience the emotions, the buyer's remorse, the toy that breaks, the toy that doesn't live up to the commercials, the toys that all the other kids stop playing with. The things you spent your money on didn't have the things that you felt you would get from them, so forth, and it just goes on and on and on. And one day, as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, you hit rock bottom. And now you're ready to develop some ability to save for a goal, or maybe you're willing at least to make better choices.
I felt this analogy, Doug, and you guys didn't present it this way, so this is all Joe right here. This is my addition to this conversation. We had Annie Duke on talking about poker, and she's talking about just minimizing your losses, right, and maximizing when the pot's big, maximizing your wins. And I felt like as I was reading this, while the pot's small, while Carol's making $10 decisions, or Carol, when your child's making, $2 decisions in the next few years, let them screw up with $2 and $10 so that when the pot's big later, they've already been through the emotions of $2 and $10.
Well, we're talking, as a young adult, we're talking student loans and 401ks. We're talking real money now, not just $1,000 in high school or $100 in elementary school or $10 at the dollar store as a 5-year-old.
You told Doc G, Carol, our friend Doc G, about growing up with your dad, something about some story about like every other parent's headed to work and you're passing by, you're on your way to school or something and passing your dad like with a surfboard.
Oh yeah, so the school bus stop for both the middle school and the high school, it's on the one road that you need to get out of the neighborhood. So every single parent is going to be passing by that bus stop on their way to work in the morning. And so everyone will do the aloha wave, the shaka, hey, have a good day at school. And most of these parents are, they're wearing their aloha vests because they're going to work. Well, unlike all the other parents, here comes my dad to the intersection. And he's not, expeditiously making it to the stop sign and then taking that left to go back up the hill. No, he's creeping and crawling across the bus stop until he makes it to that bus stop. And then you see the entire 1993 Ford Taurus in its aqua glory, with multiple longboards strapped across the top. Now, we just saw the banker in the Mercedes-Benz go by 5 minutes ago, whizzing as fast as he could. No, no. Now we got this old Ford Taurus that's inching up to the line with the surfboards on top. And Dad's saying, have a good day at school. I'll be at the beach. And I'm just like, I got to get a good job. I got to get a good job. That way I'm not that dude that's stuck in the Mercedes going to work as fast as he possibly can. I want to go to the beach.
Yeah. Yeah, what a great lesson at the beginning. And I want to take that and go to something, Carol, that you really outline, like teaching kids about money. You've got the journalistic approach, right? Who, what, when, where, why, how. Can we walk through those briefly?
There is this need to try to find the exact moment and the exact place and set up the right situation. I mean, it's the basis of every sitcom we've ever seen, right? You're trying to manipulate the situation so that you as the parent have the perfect moment to throw in the lesson and say, and this is how you do it. And that never happens with kids. I mean, again, you have no control over anything. It seems like everything that they do. But what you can do is you can kind of look at the situations you already have to do and see if there's a way that you can include your kid in the situation. A big classic is you're probably hauling your kids to the store with you. Pick your store. You know, if it's the grocery store, if it's Target, I'm one of those people. If it's anything that you love to go and shop at, well, bring your kids along with you. And then give them your credit card at the beginning of the store. Just let them hold the credit card while you're walking around the store. And that's all they have to do is make sure the credit card is still there when you get to the end of the store. Otherwise, they can't buy anything. But then they get to swipe the credit card, or they get to tap the credit card or hand it to the cashier. You know, just let them have a little bit of inclusion there. And when you have that credit card in hand, you would be amazed with the questions that your kid will come up with. What do these numbers mean? Mommy, is that your name right there? What does this date mean over there? How come you get a silver card? I want a red card. How do I get a red card? You know, all these little different things that you can just talk about. And the idea there is not that you're hitting a certain benchmark or meeting a certain standard or anything else that we've heard about in the public school system. The point is that you're just taking the stuff you would ordinarily do and having a conversation about it, which inevitably is going to wind up talking in some way, shape, or form about the very topic you're here for, which is money.
That's fabulous. I remember when I got tired of, as another money guy, another money nerd, I got tired of my kids just always asking for stuff at the grocery store. So I would give them the list, and then we would hunt. It would take longer, but they were great moments, especially when we got to the item and we learned to talk about, now this is when they're a little older, maybe 5th grade, 6th grade, unit cost, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So my kids would then look at the unit cost of things and would find out that sometimes the bigger pack is the better deal because you're buying in bulk, and other times it's not, right? And there's just these ahas. And the amazing thing about this was the only reason I did it was not the noble mission you guys are on to teach kids about money. I just didn't want to bitching anymore. I didn't want them asking me for stuff. It was actually easier to educate them than it was to take this constant grind of, Dad, can I have, can I have, can I have? You're like, oh man.
And it's that game of fetch,
is,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that whole game of I'm doing it with my own 2.5-year-old. It's like, I don't want to go and get something for you. I want you to go get it. You know, can you go get my shoes for me? Can you go get the groceries for me? Can you go do this? And that's naturally how it progressed, right? At first it was you want the kids to go over to the next aisle and go get that stuff ahead of you. What you don't realize is that in a subliminal plane, you're actually training them to be your delivery driver when they get their own car. So now the new incentive is they get to go drive to the grocery store by themselves. Mom and Dad isn't watching them. They get to play whatever they want on the radio on the way there. Like, it is their ride. And then if you give them a delivery at the end of that, a delivery fee, the same way that you would pay the Shipt or the Uber Eats or the Grubhub or however you would pay for delivery, well, you pay your teenagers that instead.
That's fabulous.
This sounds really stupid, but the whole idea wasn't that we were giving Carol all these wonderful pieces of advice about money. Instead, we would try to figure out the financial incentives. And the idea for this came out of our Navy careers, where if you signed up for more sea duty, you got paid a little more money. If you agreed to sign a contract to stay on active duty for 3 or 4 or 5 years, you'd get a little bit more money. And we said, geez, maybe this will work on a 7-year-old. So, Carol, if you make a healthy lunch at home and take it to school instead of buying school lunch, we'll let you keep half the money. Or if you clip coupons for things we normally buy at the grocery store, we'll let you keep half the savings. And if you ride your bicycle to school instead of taking the school bus and buying the school bus ticket, we'll let you keep half the money. You can see the trend here. And a kid that gets that financial incentive at first will test it out to make sure it really works. And as long as the financial system at the family house holds up and follows through on those commitments, it's a very powerful incentive. And they will look for opportunities to make more money because they understand now that when they put out effort, it gets rewarded, just like your employer gives you a bonus.
I want to ask you, Doug, about digging more on that, because you make a statement early in the book that as Carol is growing up, you and Marge are sharing everything about your money. Like as she asked, it feels like nothing is off limits. Was there anything off limits with Carol that she'd ask about that you'd say no? Because I was much more like the average family in America, where my brother, sister, I would walk in the room, and if they're having a financial conversation, my parents, we were told to leave.
That's how I grew up, and that's where my financial literacy was all the way up into my early 20s. And you've heard of the talk about revenge parenting, where you raise your kids better than you were raised. That was one of the things we tried to do. But it was also a factor, again, of our military career, because all of our pay in the military is listed on a website for everybody in the country to look up anytime they want. If you know what somebody does in the military, you can go to this website and look up their pay, look up their special pay, figure out all their benefits, and you can come up pretty closely approximating how much money they earn. And I was shocked about all the conversations in civilian corporate America where we don't talk about our pay, we don't talk about our bonuses, we don't talk about any of that stuff, because there would be...
We don't talk about Bruno.
Yeah, exactly. There'd be pitchforks and torches in the streets, and there'd be rioting, and it never occurred to us. So as we were raising Carol, we would reassure her. One of the things that happens when you're financially independent, you stop working, is your child becomes aware that you're not earning any money from a job like the other families. And they start to worry, who's paying the electric bill? Where are my groceries coming from? Are we poor? Do we have to move? So we would reassure her. We have this much money in the budget for electricity. We have this money in the budget for going to the beach. We have this much money in the budget for surfboard wax. And we have enough money to do the things that we need to do and some of the things we want to do. And so here's how it works. And we would go over the budget. And I remember, Carol, there was one day you looked over my shoulder. I was working on our net worth statement or something like that, and you said, "Holy shnikes, Dad, we're rich." Yeah. But that was a teachable moment, right? And the whole discussion was, well, this money has to last for the rest of our lives, and it looks like a lot of money, and maybe it is, but I'm only 40-something years old, and this money's going to have to last for another 60 or 75 years, and here's how we would do that. And at this point, Joe, you can talk for a while, and suddenly you notice their eyeballs start to glaze over, so you know that the message has been delivered, and you can move on to some other subject.
Or not, right?
That's right.
Or maybe not. Carol, your dad mentioned revenge parenting. Is there anything that your parents did that you would do differently?
I wish I could take credit for this, but really I need to blame COVID for this. I remember as a kid having to deal with the tag team parenting, and a lot of families will say it's not our fault, and they're right. When you have a full-time job that demands your time, not just during business hours, but thanks to cell phones and the internet, now it's in evenings and weekends as well. It's really tough when you're a kid that has no idea what work is, that you have to explain to the kid, no, you can't do this right now. Mommy needs to finish this phone conversation. Mommy needs to send this email. Mommy needs to go and make sure that this is taken care of. And it's that give and take that we're already dealing with as Americans, as adults, about when it is you put down the cell phone and you log out of the work email, and when you have to leave. Well, when COVID happened, my daughter was born exactly 2 months before COVID lockdowns started in our home state. And so the day she got vaccinated with the ordinary 2-month-old vaccination schedule was the day that they said, and we're shutting down until further notice due to COVID. And so for the next 18 months, she got more of mom and dad than she ever wanted in the first place. Because we were at home. We weren't going anywhere except for the neighborhood park. We would go to the grocery store, and depending on the day, I would have her strapped to my chest because she's still a baby at the time. I would have her strapped to my chest as we're going around the grocery store. So I'm pulling things off the shelf and she's doing the baby thing of drooling and looking around. I mean, we had so much quality time together that by the time she was 18 months old, we started daycare not because we parents needed it, but because she was sick and tired of us. She would start doing the things that made it obvious. It's like, I don't want to be here anymore. just get me away from you folks. I'll come back for the meal, but until then, just to get me out of here.
I've got two more questions, sticking with you for a second, Carol. You learned this idea from your parents of the 20-minute mantra. I really like the 20-minute mantra. Can you tell people what this is all about?
So my mother, I would like to point out that my mother also has a phrase called sustained superior paperwork. So my mother is a force to be reckoned with. And that's probably where I inherited my hurricane abilities from. Anyway, she has this thing called all hail 20 minutes a day. And she's actually right in a lot of ways that I am still discovering as an adult, as a parent, is if you just set a timer for 20 minutes, you would be amazed what you can accomplish in just 20 minutes. It's a third of an hour. It's 2 blocks of 10. It's an entire TV show. Call it whatever you want, but it's just 20 minutes. And that's the kind of time that you can use to, quickly pick up all the clean surfaces on the house, clear off the dining room table, empty the dishwasher, start the laundry. It only takes 20 minutes. But when you have that laundry list of, I have to, clean off all the surfaces and start the dishwasher and clean off the dining room table, it sucks. You don't want to do it. You're just staring at that thing and it just feels like a brick wall. But if you just set a timer for 20 minutes, it becomes a race. It becomes fun. Yeah. And so now you're trying to see how much you can finish, how quickly you can finish, because if you can do it in less than 20 minutes, you didn't spend 20 minutes after all.
But I loved where she learned this too, was in college. If I remember the story right from the book, she had spent 20 minutes studying every day, and then she wanted to cram for the exam, ended up not able to cram for the exam because her roommate, I think, didn't show up for a watch or some duty. So she had to take her roommate's place, and she still aced the test because she spent 20 minutes a day. Which was fabulous. Doug, one last question for you. What the heck is a kid 401k spreadsheet?
The kid 401k teaches a kid to save for a goal that's a lifetime away. It's a lot like a 401k. And the whole idea is that at 8 years old, you put together a spreadsheet where you show how by the time the kid is 16 years old, if they invest their mandatory contribution into the kid 401k, along with generous parental matching and an awesome stock market. I think I had to have the stock market work at like 15% per year every year for 8 years. If you do those things in a spreadsheet, by the time they're 16 years old, they will have money to go buy any car they can afford. And you notice I didn't put a number on that. I just said any car that you can afford. Let the fantasizing begin. And so as an 8-year-old, that's the ultimate power, is being able to drive the car wherever you want, whenever you want. And it totally de-stresses the whole idea of, hey, what car am I going to get when I'm 16, Dad? Hey, Mom, what am I going to get when I'm 16? Instead, they have a chance to look at the spreadsheet. You give them monthly reports. The stock market performance has been stellar. The thing is working on track. Everything's going great. And then you also take that opportunity to have a conversation about, well, when you are 16 years old, what kind of car are you going to get? Did you notice the prices at the gas station if you're driving a gasoline car? Did you know that you have to pay money to insure a car? And so you talk about all those things. And eventually, by the time they're 11, 12 years old, this has become internalized. And they learn that they can make their own choices for their own car with their own budget, with what is their own money. So the kid 401k, I mean, when you're an 8-year-old and you've got to wait 8 years, that is literally a lifetime. But it's the biggest deferred gratification program we had ever thought of, that we had ever come up with. And it worked great, I think. Right, Carol?
And so here's the twist that Mom and Dad didn't see coming. The nice thing about finances in general is that you can use quantifiable and qualifiable values. So they didn't give me a number. They didn't give me a quantity. They just said, any card you can afford. That was a quality. And you as the parent didn't have to try to figure out, inflation rates and how much cars are going to cost these days and what happens when we have another chip shortage and what happens if we have another COVID and inflation and that's too much. By making it qualifiable, then I have to figure out all that stuff and I have to use my kid brain to figure that out. And so at around age 14, we're in the car, we're going somewhere. I'm sitting in the back seat. Mom and Dad are sitting in the front seat. And we're sitting in the very same Ford Taurus that had been the surfboard hauler for all these years. And Mom and Dad say something like, and we're not sure if we need to buy a new car. And I knew already at age 14 that they were not referring to the current year model. They were referring to a used car that was a decade younger than the Taurus we were driving in right now.
New to me.
New to us.
Yes. Yeah, right.
Yes. Well, this just happened to be, let's see, I was 14 years old. It was 2006, and the Toyota Prius had the hybrid model that was out, and it was this massive amount of gasoline efficiency. I know 2006 was only 16 years ago, but for everybody that just said, holy crap, that was 16 years ago, welcome. But when you have this Prius that has all this gas efficiency, well, I've been sitting in the back seat with Dad pointing out the gas station saying, hey, you're going to have to pay, because this is Hawaii, $3 a gallon when you start driving. You're going to have to figure out how to come up with $3 for every single gallon of, and I'm doing the math in my head of, I live in the middle of the island, so to get to the beach, I'm going to have to pay this many gallons, which is this many dollars. I need a more fuel efficient car. So the 14-year-old me in the back seat looks at my parents and says, well, I have $5,000 in my kid 401k. If you guys want to buy a new to you Prius that's only a couple of years old, I'll put in my share. I'll give you all $5,000 if you let me be the primary driver on the car. And for the first time I remember in my childhood, there was silence in the front seat. And they had that moment I now recognize as the spouse look. They kind of just look at each other like, you go first. No, I'm not going to go first. You go first. And so I think someone finally spoke up and said, that's a good idea. We'll think about it. And so when they thought about it, they actually came back with what was essentially a lease contract. They basically said, well, we understand that you're going to give us $5,000 and we'll accept, but here's some of the terms. First, you're going to be the one in charge of taking care of the car. So you're going to have to make sure that the oil changes are taken care of. You're going to have to make sure that there's tires, there's air in the tires. You're going to have to make sure that you're locking it appropriately. Do the car washes if you want. We don't care. Make sure you're taking care of the car. Any damage you do to the car, we're going to take out of your $5,000 deposit. And so that right there was incentive to tell my friends to not bang their door against everybody else's door in the parking lot, and to not sit on my car and make a nice dent in certain aspects, or to kick my car, or to do this or do it. It was mine. It was my money. And it was a very visible thing day to day that you will respect my car. And then I was born late in the year. I actually have a Halloween birthday. And so I knew I was only going to have the car for about a year and a half, from the day I turned 16 until I go to college a year and a half later. And so part of the deal was, when you go off to college, we'll give you back your deposit minus damages. And then you can use that money however you see fit going forward into college. And so I went into college with $4,800. Minor fender bender.
Sweet.
I went into college with $4,800, and a couple of years into college, it just so happened there wasn't enough housing on campus, so I moved off campus, and now I need a car. And so I'm doing the whole used car shopping thing that I just watched my parents do for most of my childhood. That I go on what was now Craigslist, and I started looking for used cars. I do the whole negotiation process. I'm looking up consumer reports to make sure that the model that I'm interested in and the year that I'm interested in won't have transmission issues or engine issues or brake fluid issues, or pick a recall, and there's probably something out there. But I'm actually spending the $10 a month subscription to make sure I have that information ahead of buying what wound up being a $4,200 1999 Honda CR-V. And I purchased the 1999 in the year 2012. And that car only had to make it 4 years, but it literally made it all the way out to my duty station in Spain with the Navy and back to the United States.
That
Fabulous.
car was a hacker. I was impressed.
It was wonderful. But that was the culmination of my financial education as a teenager. I had learned that I could spend all my money on a Mercedes, and it would be, literally this happened once, it could be wrecked by somebody else in the parking lot. Or I could have a cheaper car that I gave utmost respect to and got my friends to respect, and I would still have money left over to pay for the gas, to make the oil changes, have somebody else do the oil changes now. All these little factors that we've been talking about for the last 18, 19, 20. I mean, the conversation never ends. All those years, we're finally coming to fruition.
The book is called Raising a Money Savvy Family. It is fabulous. And by the way, it's not just these quirky, amazing, fantastic stories about not just money lessons, but a family that talks about money. You guys go over when's the right time to start teaching kids about money. You talk about allowances. You talk about, just all the stages of teaching kids and getting them into saving, but I think in a way that's actually going to stick. Books available where, guys?
In the library.
Everywhere. Yes.
Nice. Nice job. Good work. And spoken like a frugal dad there, Carol. Where else is it available?
So if your local library does not have it because the hours don't work out to your schedule, been there, done that,
Okay.
I know. Then they do offer it everywhere that you buy books. So you can find it on Amazon. I find Amazon to be my favorite just because Kindle editions are cheaper than print editions, and it's just wonderful that way. But you can find it Amazon. I'm pretty sure we've heard a lot of folks saying that they've bought our book as a means to support their local bookstore and their local small businesses.
Yes.
That's also another opportunity that you have.
I love the physical version of the book, by the way, because this is a book I would mark
you.
up. So unfortunately, I can't get it from the library. So
Well, I'm not saying
Yeah.
you should deface public property like that, but it certainly has happened. I'll also point out that the audiobook from Audible, the audiobook is what's turned out to be most popular because you're in the car, you're working out, or your kids aren't going to bother with an ebook or a paper copy. But if they're listening to it in the car with mom and dad, which is already not cool, then at least they're willing to have a conversation about money.
it's fabulous. Carol, Doug, thanks to both of you, by the way, for your service to the country. We really appreciate that so much. And thanks for helping stackers raise financially
Absolutely.
savvy family.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for the support, Joe, and we really enjoy doing this conversation.